Meeting to order. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Here.
Here.
Councilmember Gelder.
Here.
Councilmember Osborne. Here.
Here.
Vice Mayor Pizzillo. All here.
First up, I guess Larry Lang, you're going to give us an update on the new policy regarding to the water.
Thank you. If I could get the presentation up, please, Eddie. Thank you. Tonight, we're going to talk about utility services, deposits relating to those, and House Bill 2450 that the Arizona legislature adopted in its 2009 session, which became effective July 29th of 2010. I'm sorry, it was the 2010 session. We're in the 11 now. I'm off a year, but it was last year's session is the point I wanted to make. As we'll discuss, that affects how the city does business with its utility customers in regard to delinquent debts and not payments. We've waited to bring this forward to you to let the dust settle on a lot of issues that were involved in that, and we'll go through what some of those issues are in this presentation tonight. Cities around Arizona have made adjustments to their code. We're proposing adjustments to our code as part of this, and because our code is not in compliance today with it, we have been following the code, and I'll go in, or the state law, which does prevail there. So let me just talk about House Bill 2450 first. It amended Section 9-511.01 of Arizona Revised Statutes, and that addresses charges for water and wastewater service. It added two new provisions relating to those services. One, it prohibited municipalities from holding property owners responsible for rental tenants' delinquent debt. And the second is it prohibits municipalities from denying service to the property owner or new tenant when previous tenant has outstanding debts. In these two cases, a couple of examples of things that caused this legislation. One is in the area of foreclosures. Investment property may have had renters in it. They didn't pay their utilities. Going through, say, the foreclosure process, a realtor wanted to show the property. Someone wanted to clean up the property. And many cities, Goodyear included, would not allow the water to be turned back on until all of the past expenses got paid. Other examples included tenants that were, or landlords that were held responsible for tenants that left in the middle of the night. The landlord felt that they really didn't have control over the situation, and that was the basis for the legislation that got put through a year ago. Now, since this legislation, we do have a code provision. I guess I should start there. We have a provision in our code that says that the property owner is responsible for that property and for the services there. The state law is obviously in conflict with that provision of the code, and since state law has been in effect, we have not been enforcing that particular provision within the code. But as a result of that, whoa, did I go way too far? Yes, I was told to be brief, and I listen to instructions when I get them. This does impact residential properties of 4 or fewer units, the state law change. The two charts show our city residential utility customers by type of account. On the left-hand side is a pie chart showing the number of accounts. 85% of our accounts are by property owners. 14% of our accounts are renters at this point in time. The chart on the right shows our delinquent accounts by type of account. And you can see that 55% of our delinquent accounts are on property owners, and that number, I think, has increased, significantly over the past few years, but 43% are by the 14% that make up the renters in these accounts.
Well, that tells me that we're going to have to probably change our warning notices to people.
And that's part of what we're going to be discussing this evening is a proposal of how we deal with this with these changes.
Thank you.
Obviously, the renters pose specific problems that are not necessarily the same as the property owners. Generally, they may move more frequently. They can be more difficult to locate once they vacate a property. They can vacate unexpectedly, leaving overdue bills. And even with prompt disconnects, there could be a balance due, and there likely will be a balance due. Our staff has run estimates of what a typical account is at the time we shut the water off, and the balance on that account is about, on average, is $290.81. These debts range between $180 and $690. And these are not just renters. When I give you that information, that's just all of our residential customers.
Larry? Oh,
Yes, sir.
I was gonna say, how many months is that usually? 'Cause-
I'm going to talk about a schedule in just a minute. If I
Sorry.
don't answer it at that point, we'll come back to your question. And Joe, did we?
I have the same question.
Okay. This chart shows the accounts that are in collections. What that means is that they are in a process where we are going through to try to collect an outstanding balance, generally through a collection agency. We're still working the accounts, but they're not active accounts within our system. And we show this by year, by fiscal year, when those accounts became put in for collections, okay? And so what you can see in those years is that those amounts have varied, but in all cases, they represent below 1% of the budgeted revenue for that particular fiscal year.
I have a question, Larry. On the 6-7 accounts, do we still have 201 and we still are owed $75,000? Are we out $500,000 in bad debt right now?
That would be the existing balance today, is the total of all of these, which would actually be, I believe,
So-
closer to $650,000. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And that's part of why I wanted to show it by year, because these haven't been written off on an annual basis. That's an accounting procedure, not literally written off the books. They've been written off the active accounts. They're shown as not only closed, but in the collections part of the process.
So are we working to try to collect the 09, 010 accounts and the 10, 11 accounts?
All of
Or are
them.
we working to try to
get
count everything that's here?
All of them on the list. We're working. But obviously, the more effective will take place during that. Keep in mind, again, the percentages there. We're less than 1% of our total revenues.
I'm keeping in mind that it's $650,000, and that's a fire truck.
Yeah,
That's a lot of money.
Well, it is cumulatively, but each year, a lot of businesses would be very pleased with that type of a collection ratio. And some of the people at the legislature that have supported this, the bills that have been passed, have pointed that out. City of Phoenix has a similar collection ratio, and they're saying that 1% collection or 1% bad debts ratio, that is not too bad in a business environment.
Larry, do we have an outside agency that gets a percentage, or how do we collect, especially with those really old debts? 6,
We
7?
just entered into a new contract with an outside agency here several months ago. I can't say exactly when, and they do get a percentage of it. If I remember right, it's approximately 15%. 15 to 20 would be a good range of what that is.
Okay, what they get.
Right.
Real quick, Larry, do we have the capability of cross-reference if, say, somebody who owes us money in 06, 07 comes in tomorrow to pull out a water account? we have the capability of knowing that they owed us money in 06, 07?
That's correct. As far as the changes in the law, and this gets to Councilman Souza's questions earlier, we investigated approaches by other communities of what they've been doing in response to this, because many communities beyond ourselves did have provisions that would make the property owner responsible. What virtually all of the communities did, all but 2 communities actually, did the contract with the tenant only, which was the intent of the legislation. A couple of communities took an approach that said, well, the legislation said that we could not do this unless there's a contract with the owner, so we will require a contract with the owner. In one community, it's with the owner only. In the other community, it's with the renter and the owner, and kind of worked out the same way. The legislature that was involved in adopting this and the various people the lobbyists that supported it took that as kind of a slap in the face, saying you didn't understand the basic premise of it. And in fact, in this particular session, there are 2 bills proposed, House Bill 2193 and Senate Bill 1157, that would not permit the options that some of those communities were looking at. So our recommendation, consistent with the bills that are currently proposed and going through the legislature very smoothly, is to go with the contract with the tenant only and not to hold the property owner responsible for those.
That means then that the collection agency is going to follow up on the tenants.
The collection agency would follow up with the tenants, but also what we're proposing is, in fact, let me go through this slide here. No, that's fine. Those are good questions. One, what we're proposing is to revise the code to remove the property owner requirements regarding responsibility for the tenants, and that's to be consistent with House Bill 2450. We're also going to explore internally the opportunities of shortening the disconnect time frame. And I want to go over what those time frames are in answer to the previous question. Today, a bill goes out. The due date for that bill is 24 days after the bill is sent. After that point in time, the 25th day, late notice is sent out. After 38 days, a delinquency notice is sent out that states that if it is not paid by a certain date, that their water will be turned off. And then at 54 days after the bill, after the bill went out, 54 days later, that's when their actual service would be terminated.
You mean 54 days after it was due, not it was mailed. You mean after it was due?
No,
The due
after
date?
it was mailed. That 54 days from the day it was mailed until it's turned off. Because it's due in
First-
24 days, so it's another 30 days past that.
Okay.
Now, with that, keep in mind also that by that time, they've accrued other bills
Yeah.
that had other service. So there's more that may be in there. But that's today's timing. What we're looking at, and I want to say look at because there's a lot of variables involved with that. We're looking at shortening that window. And that window down, basically turning it down from 54 days on the turn-off to 40 days. There, that seems kind of obvious there because that gives us a little less dollars, if you will, outstanding and at risk to shorten that window. But we also have to look at the timing of the collections on it, the change, and to see if that'll truly generate better cash flow by doing that, and if it's being reasonable. That's kind of from, I'll say that's an administrative area that we're looking at. We also have to look and see what type of impacts that could have to various systems that we have in place.
Now, it's the same if they leave, if the tenant has left his premise.
If the tenant leaves, this process would follow the same if we didn't know about it. If we knew about it and if they turned off the service, it would be from the date they turned off the service. But yes, sir, that would be a very consistent following. So, yes.
Is there, because I know like for Salt River, if you haven't paid your APS bill, they don't collect for them, but they're not going to start your service there because you have outstanding delinquencies sometimes. Is there anything between the cities where we know or they know if they try to start an account, say in Buckeye or something?
Not between the cities. Internally within each city there was discussion of trying to develop a database of that type of information, but the maintenance of that database would be quite complex. And from the various people that were involved in the legislative meetings that I participated in, these weren't at the legislature, they were led by a member of the legislature, so that's what I'm referring to. And the people involved in those discussions from the various cities were not very interested in trying to develop that database. But most cities do look internally. So one of the things that we're looking at and proposing in there is increasing the rental tenant deposit to mitigate losses. Today, the deposit is $100, and it's the same for property owners and renters. Subject to legal concerns, we're looking at not having the property owners subject to the deposit, but having the renters subject to the deposit, putting it at $225. And I'm going to show you in a chart how that compares to other cities, and it is kind of on the high end. So I want you aware of that.
Would that depend at all on credit or slide?
At that point, it would not. One thing that we would be changing from existing practices is today, after a year of paying, you get your deposit back. But if circumstances change and the account went bad, we wouldn't have that ability to. We have had a number of conversations with owners before House Bill 2450 went in effect. More than one time, a property owner found out that we had a deposit on their property. We gave it back after a year, and then 2 years later, when the tenant defaulted on it, we went after the property owner for collection, and they didn't think that was very fair at that point in time. So the landlord, though, could allow a waiver, and that's totally optional on the landlord's side of it, that the property owner, in other words, they could guarantee the payment, then the deposit wouldn't be necessary. Removing the deposit for property owners is part of our proposal, again, subject to legal counsel review and subject to comments from you. But if when they've had their second delinquency within a year, we would be required to collect the deposit from them. And the point of that is if they've got, and by delinquency, we mean where that water would have been shut off. And then at that point in time, that gives us very good means of communication that says, I want you to understand this time we're able to let you reinstate your service for this cost, but it would cost you an additional $225 in the future if you didn't keep that credit. And we would discontinue the practice of refunding the deposits after 1 year, but apply those deposits to the final bill. So what do other valley communities do?
Okay, wait, Larry. Could you go back? Could you explain the remove the deposit for property owners? I don't understand how you're going to.
Today, a property owner comes in, and we would charge them a $100 deposit for that. Now, we do allow collection letters on that, which means if they've had a year's good payment record, we allow that to offset it, as we do with renters. What we're saying moving forward, the proposal would be that we would not require property owners to make that deposit.
And the logic behind that?
The logic behind that is on top of the collection practices where you know where that owner is, you tend to know where they are. The second half of that is that they do control their property. You can file a lien on the property and keep that lien active. You cannot file a lien on that property with a renter. Again, I'm going to say subject to legal counsel review.
How effective has the liens been? Do you have that information?
I do not think they've been very effective, just bluntly. Because we've just started putting practices in place a couple years ago, Rorik, if I remember right, just recently that we started to, but the follow-up on the liens and then with the foreclosure part of it, it's very difficult, and we need to make sure everything's in control before we do those.
But, after the sale of the home is made, okay, who are you going to go after with the lien?
That's true. If a property is sold and we haven't filed a lien on it, we're done. Absolutely correct. If we haven't filed a lien, that would be correct. But that would involve only those people.
Then how can we put a lien on property prior to sale?
Mr. Mayor, members of council,
What-
you also need to
Where's the notification?
think through what the cost effectiveness is to put a lien on for relatively small dollar accounts anyway. So, I mean, there's a significant amount of staff time involved in that as well. So, good point. With the foreclosure problem, it is very difficult. In what position do you fall on that lien as well? So, I don't think it's been very effective at all.
I don't think historically it has.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay. Okay, it got tired on me here. We'll try one more time and see if I got it the right way. There we go. Okay. We wanted to give you a representation of what other communities are charging. The ones that you see in the light blue font, which is Avondale, Gilbert, Glendale, Goodyear, Peoria, those communities either have recently changed or in the process of changing what their deposits are. Our existing deposits in Goodyear are $100 for each of those. You can see a very close similarity of what we're proposing to what Peoria adopted, and that's because they had a program that the real estate people that backed this legislation were supportive of. So that's very similar. As I mentioned earlier, our existing average account balance for those delinquencies that we shut off is $290, but it ranges from $180 up to $650, obviously a very broad range. When the deposit is waived with good credit, most of these do refund the deposit. I know a couple of these, the ones that have changed recently have changed their practices on refunding the deposits at the same time. So where do we go from here with this discussion? Obviously, tonight was a discussion to present the issue to you as well as get any input that you might have. We will then from there have to prepare a written report showing, supporting an increased rate, fee, or service charge, which has to be available in the clerk's office. And what that really is referring to is because of the increase in the deposit under state law, we have to give notification of that. After that notification, approximately in April, 30 days after that written report is available, we would adopt the notice of intent at a regular council meeting. And then in May, 30 days after that notice of intention, we would have a public hearing and adoption of the deposit fee. And the only fee at this point in time that we're looking at changing is the deposit. And with that, I'll take any further questions or comments.
Anyway, why don't we start down here on the right? Go ahead with Councilmember Lorentano.
Okay, with the, we're not waiving it with good credit, but we're giving it back after a year, or we're still holding it?
We will still hold it. In this case, all of the proposal is that we will hold it until the account is closed.
With the homeowners, I like the zero, because otherwise people aren't going to want to buy a house here if they're going to have to put up another $225 for that. With the rental, do we know if that's going to impact our rental market, having that high a fee on there?
The discussions that we had, the legislator involved in this discussion is actually in the business of property management. And his point was, he doesn't want to see us do a huge deposit for obvious reasons, but he wants us to put a deposit in that would cover what the cost of service is. He doesn't want us to lose money on this deal.
Is it $225 then? Is that what an average bill and maybe disconnect fees? Is that where we get that from then?
Yeah, that would be a couple months. Actually, our average is about $290. That assumes that we can shorten that average a little bit. Quite frankly, we dropped it down from the 290, say, to 300, a round number, because no other city is charging that high. Yeah. So it was calculated the other way. 200 might be a rounder number. We're just proposing 225 as a consistency.
I guess my concern is I'd like, when you waive it, if someone has good credit, if they have been paying, they can show proof they've paid APS, other cities or other utilities, to give them treat them at a different level for having the good credit and paying their bills than someone who may have not paid their bills. And then I can really understand having the deposit if someone does have bad credit and is having problems. And I would just be concerned that we might scare some renters away here who are good payers. We might not get the good payers who might go somewhere else, especially now. That's just my thoughts on it.
Okay.
Councilmember Kevler? No comment. Councilmember Gelser?
I support the $225 for renters. I remember when I was a dashing young single Navy officer, and every apartment that I had to get, I had to put a first month deposit down on electricity, phone, water, damage, and I tried not to damage it. But, I'm sorry, a deposit is a surety. The other thing, I have trouble with the zero deposit for an owner-occupied space. I think that for an owner-occupied house, that if they have good credit with the city, that a deposit is not required because they've been paying on time. But if they have a delinquent account or a spotty account, I think a deposit should be required. And I think I would put it at $225 also. And I think that's something that the city can determine, that if they haven't paid appropriately or they're consistently late, why should we have to pay for their poor financial management?
If I can ask a question on that, what we were proposing was that your second delinquency notice, as a property owner now, your second delinquency notice of a shutoff would trigger a deposit at that point in time. Are you suggesting
I would move it I would move it up as
to
soon
the
as,
first one?
I would move it up to the first one. As soon as you're going to tell them you're going to shut it off, get the deposit or turn it off.
Good point.
Can you do that?
One of the practical things, I'm not touching a legal question. I think you could legally. One of the practical issues we've talked about is a person who hasn't paid their utility bill generally isn't rolling in cash. And so at that point in time, now one of the things either way with these programs that we could look at is, and it would depend on what our software could do. I've been in other communities that allow that deposit to be paid over a couple, 3 months. So maybe we could do some way with that as a means of getting there. We would have to research how.
Larry, I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem if that person comes in and talks to the bill collecting people at the city. At least they made an effort, and we can work out some kind of program with them. Right. I don't have a problem. It's the people that ignore it. That's who we need to get the money.
At least you have something up front with an outstanding bill.
Councilmember Osborne?
Does this, I thought that apartments that you didn't have to put.
This is rental housing.
This is rental housing.
And it's
okay.
Where property owners own 4 or less units.
Okay.
Now, because we may not know that in our utilities office, we'll apply it, but it is single family. It will not be complexes?
Well, I guess that, I understand we're in a situation where obviously $600,000 is really starting to hurt. But, given the time right now, so many people that have had foreclosed homes, they're going out to rent a new house. And they have no other option. They don't have a lot of cash, obviously. And so, we're making it more difficult by increasing. We're over doubling the price to turn on the water, and then obviously electricity, and then first and last month's rent, and everything else that a family's going to have to go through to get into that home. Plus, you're also shortening the time on when that water can be turned off. Correct? You went from the 54 down to the 40.
We're researching that.
You're
yes.
researching that. I'm not sure that I'm totally behind this yet. I have to think about this.
Councilmember Souza?
I made nice statements.
I've just got a couple closing kind of remarks. Going from 54 to 40, I recall in my earlier days when I used to do some utility work, there was a regular cycle. They'd start high, they get the notice, they start to go out to do the disconnect, and the next thing you know, you get a payment. My question is, if you go from 54 to 40, how is that going to impact your workload? Because I suspect you'll have more people going through that cycle, and you'll have people going out there getting ready to shut off, and then they'll pay. And that's kind of my concern, how that would impact your workload. The second thing is I'm kind of following up a little bit on Councilmember Loretano on the number, the 225 or 290, whatever it is. I kind of like to look at credit, and the reason why I like to see the credit history, because if you have new homeowners coming in, or if you have renters coming in, especially in this economy, and say young homeowners that are trying to get started, and you charge them $290, but they have a 750 credit score or 700 credit score, I would rather see them get a break a little bit up front, unless the history shows wrong, in which they're getting a disconnect notice before we hit them with a deposit. That's my own personal take on it, because I think some of them may be just a little too much money for them, especially the ones that have a good credit record. Now, if the ones that have bad credit and you're running the risk, I can appreciate making sure you got coverage, because we don't want to be financing these additional charges on the rest of the taxpayers. So I can appreciate that, but I'm thinking of the ones with good credit. So that's kind of my comments there.
And that kind of goes back on what Gary was saying, that if, and that was back to property owners, that if they have decent credit and we waive the deposit at the beginning, the first time that they're going to have shut off, they should have to pay that deposit after that. I can understand that.
If I could, on both of those comments that you made, first of all, on the impact and the workload, preliminarily, as our staff has discussed this, they believe that they can make it work regardless, but that is part of what we would have to research. The second half on the credit history, most of the credit history that utilities such as us and other municipal utilities do is really a research of payment history. And people will bring in a letter from APS that says that they've had 12 months with no delinquencies, that type of thing. And various other utilities have accepted that as good credit. When you mention the credit scores, and we have had some discussion on it, there's a cost of acquiring those that would have to be passed along. I had someone tell me that it could be done for $5 or $10, and I don't know how in the world that happens, but we would have to determine what that cost was to go to the actual credit score. I always have been a proponent of using credit scores, but I just don't know enough about it.
I think maybe worth researching. Yes, Councilmember Gelser.
Larry, I would support, on this deposit thing, my fellow council people are starting to sound like bleeding heart liberals, and they all portray themselves to be conservatives, and I'm the one who's saying, give me the money. Well, what I would support is you could, when you turn on a new account, you could go $75 a month for 3 months, and that creates the deposit, and that way they don't have to get all the money up front, but at least during the first 3 months of service, we've collected a deposit from them, and we keep it, and we basically have the deposit. We can just spread that out.
And we'll research if we can do that reasonably within our system.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Larry.
So that's not a bad idea.
All right, thank you, Larry. I guess next up, is it ADOT? Okay, ADOT, you're up.
Good afternoon. About a little over a year ago, ADOT, or not quite a year ago, ADOT came by to give a presentation on the I-10 widening construction that was underway at that time. That construction is nearly completed. ADOT's making final preparation to begin the freeway-to-freeway interchange construction, the stack construction at I-10 and 303, as well as the 303 freeway construction from I-10 north to Camelback. Today we have Cintra Hoffman from ADOT along with two of her associates, and she will be presenting information regarding the I-10 303 stack construction as well as the 303 freeway construction that will be starting up later this year.
Thank you, David. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here this evening with you, Council. Mayor Pizzillo, council members of Goodyear. I am a resident of the city of Goodyear, so it's truly a pleasure for me to be here this evening with you. And this is my disclaimer. Everything I'm about to tell you about the travel impacts, as a resident, I will be experiencing it too. I'm here this evening with my team members, Lars Jacoby, who is our community relations project manager, and Megan Griego, Senior Communications Community Relations Officer. And again, like as David said, we're here to discuss the 303 improvements. As you know, 303 is part of the Regional Transportation Plan, Prop 400, that was passed by the voters of Maricopa County back in 2004. We began construction of 303 from I-17 to the Surprise area of Grand Avenue and Mountain View. And that section is slated to open in May. And then we're beginning to start construction of the section from Grand Avenue down to I-10, starting this summer. You are all familiar in Goodyear with construction of Prop 400 projects. As David mentioned, you've lived through the I-10 expansion, and that, as you all know, has been accelerated. The construction that you're going to be seeing on 303 is an expansion of the section, again, from Grand down to I-10. We're going to be expanding it to 6 lanes, and the interchanges will be constructed at the major cross streets. The big one in Goodyear is going to be the system interchange at I-10 and 303, and I'll get more into detail on the construction impacts. We'll start construction again this spring, or actually late summer, and it will be completed by 2014. We put this slide in here to show you what it will look like when construction is completed. This is the bridge on Happy Valley and I-17, but this is the actual bridge as completed on the northern section of 303.
That's completed now, isn't it?
That's correct, and that's what's going to be open in May. This is a typical roadway segment. So what you'll be seeing in your area will be 3 lanes on each side, so 6 lanes total, an auxiliary lane, which is a merge lane, a 10-foot wide shoulder on each side, and the median in the center, and of course room for landscaping. This is the interchange of 303 and I-10, and I'm going to go through this graphic here. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the construction. The first phase of construction will be on Citrus and Saraval. So the 2 blue spots, and I apologize, let me see if I can point. Here we go. So Citrus and Saraval will start construction in August. So August of 11 through January of 12, we will be constructing these improvements. Once we open this up, residents and shoppers down to this area, the Canyon Trails Town Center, will be able to access this area. And I think that this is a big concern of the council, rightly so, and the residents. During the time of construction of these 2 improvements, Cotton Lane will remain open. But once these are completed, we will close this off, and then we'll begin construction on this big interchange.
For how long? I'm sorry.
From January 2012 till completion, which is 2014, so 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a long construction. This is the entire interchange, though. Once it's completed, motorists will access this town center from the frontage road. So from I-10, they'll exit the frontage road onto Cotton.
Just a quick question. While this is being worked on, how are the people, I guess, on the north of I-10 going to get down to that shopping center there again?
Well, during construction, they'll be able to use Citrus and Cerevel.
Okay, that will be open.
Yes. Well, during construction, currently, they will be able to use, let me back up. During construction of these two improvements, they'll be able to use Cotton Lane.
Okay.
And then when this is completed in January of 12, they'll then be able to use Citrus and Cerevel. So prior to these two roads being completed, Citrus and Cerevel being completed, they'll be able to access it through Cotton Lane. Cotton Lane will not be closed.
So I assume there'll be directionals and all that to get people to that shopping area?
Correct. Yes. There will be proper signage.
I have a quick question for you. Since obviously it's not funded south of I-10 yet, the 303, that portion, that's further off, is this an interchange that's going to have to then be redone when that part is finally funded, or is that going to be prepared and kind of left just to kind of hook it on as soon as that's built?
Councilmember, that's a tough question for me to answer. My initial reaction is probably not. That the portion south of I-10 would be separate. What's funded in Prop 400 now is completed through this interchange.
Okay, because my question was kind of like, is this going to have to be redone then, this interchange later? It's not, or? Okay.
I don't believe so.
Okay,
no.
good. That's what I questioned.
Right. Yeah. Anything else?
What is the completion date from Grand Avenue to I-10?
2014. Yes. The entire project is 2014. Yeah. The first, the phase that we're working on the first phase of it from Grand to Peoria is going to be done north-south construction, and then construction of the interchange on 303 and I-10 at the same time, and then we'll start going north. So the entire project will be completed 2014. Any other questions on this slide? Okay. It's pretty much hit this. You hit on this question about communications. This is really the point of tonight. Our goal is to get out into the community and do a lot of outreach to the business community and to the residents. We really want to communicate exactly what we're doing, how we're doing it, and to make sure that everyone's informed and has input. The first step was to come out this evening and meet with the council and let you know what we're doing and get your feedback. And then, as I introduced Megan earlier, the purpose of her role is to go out and meet with the business community and the residents. So that's our next step. We will be working with you in partnership to advertise on the website. Megan will be reaching out to Harry Paxton to make sure that we've contacted all the businesses that we can get a hold of. I've already contacted the Southwest Valley Chamber of Commerce to come out and do a presentation on this project as well as anything else that we have going on in the Southwest Valley. So our goal is, once again, to communicate with the Southwest Valley. I just wanted to bring you up to date on I-10, since I-10 improvements have been such a big deal in the Goodyear area. Just wanted to let you know that Saraval and the improvements that we've been doing from Saraval to Dysart and from Verado Way to Saraval will be wrapping up this spring. So you'll
On both the Dysart side and Litchfield side, they're already staked out various panels.
Mm-hmm.
What are those going to be filled with? Do you have any idea? Other places, it's gravel, and I'm just wondering if that's going to be the colored gravel.
council member, I'm not sure, but
Okay.
we can check and get back to
Okay,
you.
fine, thank you.
Maybe I can help.
Oh, go ahead.
There will be a follow-up landscape project between Dysart and just west of Estrella Parkway to do landscaping on the embankments alongside the ramps. So there'll be a combination of some gravel, some landscape material. They'll install an irrigation
When
system.
you say landscaping material, you mean by vegetation?
Yes, some plant material.
Okay.
And I think I understand they're going to bid this spring and start construction probably before summer.
Yeah. Then can we look forward to something like when you make the turn onto 101 going east, there's vegetation and gravel in these areas. Will it be something like that?
Something like this.
Oh, okay. Good. That's neat. Yeah. Very good. Thank you.
That concludes my presentation, unless you have any further questions this evening.
Well, let's start down on the left side. Councilmember Gelser.
I'm fine.
Osborne?
No, I think just the communication, please, really, those businesses, after going through the whole Dysart, Litchfield Road closure and Estrella, I feel for the businesses. I know what they're going through. And so there on Cotton Lane, especially with that whole Canyon Trails Center, we've got to do what we can to keep the flow of traffic to those, that community.
Councilmember Sousa?
Other than thank you for being here, appreciate it.
Councilmember Cavalier?
Yeah, I guess my concern is you're going to the HOAs, you're going to all of the residents so that they will be notified, especially those in that proximity on the Pebble Creek side. I mean, that's important that they understand it, that they bought a home there. We've tried to make it clear that was going to be adjacent to a big overpass. And I'm not sure we've sold them on it because it'll always come back, why didn't you tell us this? And we did. But, so I want to let you know. But we have informed them, and we've done everything we can to let the Robeson and everyone else know that this is something they have to tell their potential purchase land and home purchase people. So that does come back. That's the only thing I just want to assure you that we've tried to do our part.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lorentano?
Nothing. Thank you very much for the update.
Thank you.
The only thing I want to add, just real quickly, just paraphrase some of the others, is I really appreciate the communication, because that's kind of critical, especially in the business community, to make sure they're aware and the homeowners are aware of all that you're doing. So we appreciate those efforts, and thank you.
When are you going south?
I'm sorry.
When are you going south?
That is undetermined at this time.
Probably not in my lifetime.
But I can assure you that it has not been forgotten.
Okay. I have some ideas for that.
We have up next, Romina?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thanks again.
Let me tell you.
Good evening. I'm going to start off tonight and kind of give you a legislative update on what's happening right now at the legislature. We missed some good voting action this afternoon, so I'll give you a quick update on that. But wanted to just go through quickly. The presentation won't be long, so if you have any questions, stop me at any time, because I don't know what you know and don't know what you've heard. So please just stop me at any time, ask any questions. As you know, legislature's in session. There's a supermajority in both houses with 40 Republicans in the House and 21 of them in the Senate. The main focus of the legislature this year has really been twofold. One, it's been economic development and bringing jobs to Arizona, and then the second has really been government reform. That's kind of the umbrella under which they're operating most of their bills. That has been really what's happening across the country. As you probably know, other states are also looking at a lot of government reform bills. Everything from Medicare reform to collective bargaining is under attack, as well as pension reform. So it's not, this isn't unique to Arizona. It is happening across the country. Under that banner, government reform, the cities have seen a record number of bills introduced this year that have impacted us one way or another. But before I get into a few of those bills, I just wanted to go over what the governor's jobs package did, because it has been passed and signed into law, and I'm not sure that you have had the opportunity to understand what all is in there. I'm going to go over it in kind of a 30,000-foot level. If you have questions, stop me. But just so you know, the governor's jobs package created the Arizona Commerce Authority, so we no longer have a Department of Commerce. Department of Commerce is gone. What they've done is public-private partnership, and it's the Commerce Authority. It's established the Arizona Competes Fund, which is really like a job-closing fund. It's a fund of money taken from lottery, 3.5 a year for the next few years to help with infrastructure or any kind of job closing, any kind of deal that they're trying to get a company. If there's something that's standing out there to help us compete with other states, they throw some money that way to help with that company locating here. It provides a tax credit for new employment, and I'm going to go back to that in just a second to explain that a little bit further. It provides an additional tax credit for R&D, so that's something the business community has been after for years. It's an R&D tax credit. It expands that program a little bit. It expands the angel investment credit, which is for small businesses, and if there's interest in understanding more what that angel investment credit is, I can get you the actual program outlines for that. And then it phases down the commercial property tax assessment ratio starting in 2013 at 0.5% a year, every single year, and there's no end date to that.
To what?
To the commercial property tax.
0.5% a year?
0.5% a year.
To what?
To zero?
To zero?
It just keeps going until they're going to reassess it after a few years. It currently has it until I have it in here. In the bill it says,
I know.
Yep, the commercial assessment ratio goes down to 18% in 2016 and beyond is always what it says in the bill. So there's no end
So
date.
there's no bottom at that?
And then it reduces, it phases down the corporate income tax credit at the same level, 0.5% a year, starting in 2014.
To zero?
Same thing. It just keeps going down 0.5% a year, and it looks like 2017 is probably when they'll relook at it because it says 2017 and beyond. And then it increases the sales factor, and the sales factor is a formula that's used for corporations that do export. It's an export industry. It increases their sales factor, so it's a less tax on their stuff from 80 to 100%, and that is at 5% a year until it gets to 100%. So that encompasses what's in the governor's jobs package.
Do we have any estimates on what revenue-wise it will impact the cities starting in, looks like 2014?
Well, I
2013?
think overall, we did an estimate, the league put together an estimate of what it would impact cities overall across the state, and it's $22 million a year impact to cities across the state. So how that breaks down to each one of us, we haven't done, but it's $22 million a year, every single year.
Okay, I think it would be helpful at some point just to get a general idea how it might impact us, because even though we're working on what the 11, 12, 13 is not that far out.
It's not, yeah, it is.
So
not
it would
that
be
far.
kind of nice as we start to plan on how we impact some of our sales tax and a variety of other things. And as we start to lower things, and we've got this going up in the other direction, that's going
Absolutely.
to create a problem for us. So we really love to know what that impact's going to be.
The next bill I'm going to go through is really the impact fee reform bill. It seems like every year for the past 4 years I've been at the city that we've been dealing with impact fees. I think it was either last year or the year before. I'm sorry, they're starting to all run into 1 year for me when I deal with this issue. We did a moratorium on impact fees that was supposed to last 3 years. And in exchange for that moratorium, the home builders, what we thought was an agreement that we would not be addressing impact fees until that moratorium was over, so that cities had the opportunity to, catch up, do what they needed to do. Builders had that opportunity to, get back into business. Well, with the way that the legislature is made up, the Home Builder Association really feels like this is their opportunity to do what it is that they wanted to do all these years, which is reform impact fees really get everything that they've wanted. So I've given this bill to staff. It's a pretty intense bill. It changes everything that we're doing impact fees. I know staff is looking at it to really see how it impacts us directly as a city, and then how it impacts our future development. But just to go over a few of them, it limits the number of things for which impact fees can be charged. It changes how they're calculated. It redefines which developments benefit from impact fees and the process for updating our city infrastructure improvement plan. It creates a new advisory committee in each city that must have at least 60% of its members from real estate and home building industries to oversee the impact fee program. So we are responsible for putting a committee together to oversee that program. It sets up an extensive offset provision for the taxes and revenues collected for homeowners. And that's really done on purpose so that it would be really difficult for us to assess impact fees. And it establishes a refund provision, which is 5 years, which means if we're collecting impact fees for a project and it's not built in 5 years, we have to return that money. So we have a 5-year cap on how long we have to build whatever it is we're collecting for. And then it greatly extends time limits for adoption of fee schedules. And then it extends a grandfather provision that we're currently under for freezing rates on approved developments from 2 years to 5 years. So if we have a rate on a current development, it freezes that rate at 5 years. We can't raise the rate on that development for over 5 years.
Question, if we have rates in place right now that we have done, would they still be good? In my understanding, would they still be good for 5 years? We still charge those?
I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know if if we stay under these current rates right now, or we would be forced to go out and follow the rules, which is set up a committee, do a whole new fee structure based on the committee. I think that's really what would end up happening, because it doesn't say that you're grandfathered in right now until, this bill takes place. What it really says is this is what you're now responsible for doing. And so we would have to create that process in order to get our new rate structure.
The way I interpret this bill is it's designed to pretty much, there won't be any more impact fees, because the hoops they're making you jump through, it's going to be virtually impossible.
That's essentially what the goal is, yes.
Okay. So I guess the question I have, if that's the case, is does ours become, moot? If it's not grandfather, and if it does, what happens with the money that we already have? Do we have to refund that, or can we use that for capital projects? I mean, got all these questions kind of spinning as a result of this
We
one
do have
legislation.
we both have legal counsel at the league looking at what happens at money that's created right now, that we have currently in pots right now. I don't know that the bill addresses returning the money or in any case. I just think this is for future. This is how from now on you're going to be collecting your impact fees.
You might look at our grandfather's clause relative to that.
Well, and again, my concern is our CIP uses these funds and years out to build various projects, and if it becomes to the point where you're not going to have any more impact fees as a result of this, or what we have now you can't spend, it's going to probably totally turn upside down our CIP program. So that could be one of the consequences of this as a result.
That's what we're trying to analyze right now, Joe. We're going to be meeting tomorrow with a major developer because the development community is bifurcated from the home building community. The development community does not support this in general. The home building community is the one that supports it, because the one natural conclusion is that can cities afford to do development if they have no method to pay for the infrastructure?
And that's
and
where I
it
was
could
going.
be a moratorium. And so, and that would be the worst thing for the development community. So we're taking a look at all of those options right now.
Yeah, and it'd be bad for us too, but that's kind of my question. Will we be able to afford to move forward with our CIP if this gets adopted? So.
Is there, and I guess kind of a follow-up, I can't really think offhand what might be in that 5-year provision. I mean, I know that the mall is saying that it will start within the next year or two, but is there anything else out there that we've been thinking about that could fall into that 5 years, that we would already have some kind of negotiation going on, that's just been on hold? The mall is the only thing I can think of, but...
Well, one thing that comes to mind is the construction of the EMR Park, for example.
Okay.
That would be very much up in air.
Okay. So, I mean, those would be the things that as a city we need to kind of look at, what would be impacted possibly with that. Okay.
So,
How does this bill impact the creation of community facilities districts? And does that prevent us from creating a community facility district for certain areas of Goodyear?
I don't think it addresses community facilities districts. I went through it a couple of times, and I've been through the summary, and I don't see anything in there. I could be wrong, though.
I don't think it addresses CFTs. I mean, in effect, that may be where you have to go to, I would think, because
That's
the
where
new
that's
paradigm
where
would
we're
be,
going.
yeah, developers are going to have to upfront the infrastructure costs, or you're not going to develop, because cities are not going to have a financing mechanism to pay for the big capital projects.
Okay.
Guess we'll wait and see.
Thank you.
The glimmer of light in this whole thing is when this bill was introduced, it had a large number of support in both houses. We've been working really hard in educating members, especially the new ones, on what this means to growth and development, especially under the whole banner of economic growth and trying to get jobs back out there. And so this bill actually just went up for third read in the Senate and only passed by one vote. And that one vote actually flipped after a little bit of pressure. So it would have died today had that one legislator not been pressured during her vote. So the home builders are not out of the water on this one. You know, they're not out of the woods on this one yet. They didn't think that we were going to come out and get this much support. So they were very frustrated, needless to say, today during that vote. But the governor has made it very clear that if this bill has overwhelming support in both houses, she's not going to be able to veto it because that's what her caucus wants. So we have to put up a good front in the House as well in order, if we have to use her as a backstop. Okay, so the next bill is the Invest Arizona bill, which in the beginning when I said there's that tax credit in the governor's jobs bill that I was going to come back to. Do I need to stop?
We have a public hearing.
Okay.
At 6?
Yeah,
Okay, so we got to call it. Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Maybe we can.
You can recess this
Can
and
we-
come back after the regular meeting. If you
Yeah,
wanna
can we do that?
continue
Because
update.
I'd like a follow-up on some of these things, because they really impact us from a fiscal standpoint. Can we do that? What do you do,
Just
recess?
recess the work session and come back after the regular meeting.
Okay,
You have no other commitments, right?
Nope.
okay. Recess this meeting, and we're going to go into. Member Cavaliers, invocation and pledge of. Okay. Wait, what? Just adjourn the back in session for the work session.
Took longer than I thought.
More bad news, Romina?
I'm sorry?
More bad news?
No, not as bad.
Oh, okay.
At least I hope not. Although I don't have my little, I can't really switch the slides. My clicker's not here.
Romina.
It's over there. Huh? I'm sorry. Yes, he does.
Okay, so we left off right when I was starting to talk about the Invest Arizona proposal, which is the GPEC proposal on renewing the enterprise zone. And I have this handout for you just so you can follow along. I'll walk over. Originally, the update of the enterprise zone, well, let me step back. The enterprise zone this year is going to be expired. Statute expires the enterprise zone this year. And so for the past couple of years, staff has been working with GPEC as well as other cities to put together a proposal to either renew or update the enterprise zone or to change the program completely depending on what the economic needs are of the state. And so last year we had created a program, and GPEC had created a program that we supported. And it was originally in the jobs bill, which the governor has now passed and signed. But as politics would have it, it was taken out of the jobs bill. There wasn't as much support in there due to a lot of new members. People didn't understand what the program was, and so the governor pulled it out because she did not want anything in her bill that was going to be detrimental to the outcome of it passing. And so with that, what we did is we continued working with GPEC, and we now have a bill, a standalone bill, which is Senate Bill 1041, which really is a new program completely. It's not it's not what we have currently as an enterprise zone. It's a brand new program. It's a statewide program, and it has two elements to it. One of it is a non-refundable tax credit for quality job creation, which is actually included in the governor's bill, that $3,000 tax credit line that I was telling you I was going to come back to. That's what that is. And it's an income tax credit for companies that meet the qualifications that are on your page there. And then the second piece of it is a temporary real and property tax reduction for new capital investment. Now, you have to meet the qualifications. You have those qualifications that are there. Once you meet those, there is a local option to that, which really says that if the local community decides they want to offer this tax credit to that company, that's left up to the local council. It's not an automatic one that triggers at the state. So that is something that we made sure was in there this time. That's different from the renewable tax credit incentive that we had worked on last time, if you remember. So that's what Senate Bill 1041 is, and that's what we're working on with GPEC right now.
Romina, is this the one that they referred to as the tax increment financing?
No, that's different.
Is that are you going to report on that tonight?
I'm not reporting on that one just because there's still a lot of movement on that, and they're changing it daily depending on the meetings they're having with legislators. And so I was asked to hold off on a report on that.
Does it look likely that some form of that will come out?
There has been, the good thing with that specific bill is the sponsor of the bill is a very conservative senator from Tucson, who we tend to have a lot of problems with in other areas, but really likes this program. And so he's been working very hard with members, meeting one-on-one and trying to educate them on what this bill is. And so that's why I'm holding off on it, just because we don't know yet. It's had a hearing, but we don't know yet how the members are feeling about it. So we're giving him some time to work one-on-one with members before we start to talk about it more.
Thank you.
I'm sure you've heard about the two bills that were a major concern to the cities, and that was 1220 and 1221. 1220 would have changed our uniform local sales tax base. Essentially what it would have done is it would have completely gone away with the Model City Tax Code, Model City Tax Code Commission, and the audit committee. And that was really, uniform local sales tax base has been something that the business community has been after for years, and in the mantra of trying to make government less intrusive and make the economy friendlier to business, they want to simplify our tax code in the state of Arizona. The argument is that the state of Arizona has the most complex tax code in the country. A lot of people will tell you that's true. We do have one of the most difficult tax codes to follow. With that said, this bill would have completely wiped out all of the things that we tax as a city that the state doesn't tax, like construction sales tax and residential rental and other items. So it would have had a major impact to cities and towns in the hundreds of millions of dollars. This is stopped. We've been successful in stopping this bill. But there is an agreement that we will sit down as cities and towns along with the business community to look at streamlining our sales tax code to make it easier for business. Things such as changing the definitions, and there's a lot of technicalities that I'm just starting to learn about that we'll be doing, but this is going to be a multi-year program. It's not going to be something that we do overnight, and there is going to be open discussion on what works best. So that's why this bill's stopped moving, and understanding that we're going to sit down and discuss this.
Any chance the state mirrors the Model City tax code?
Any state, I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
Any chance that the state mirrors the Model City tax code?
Never.
Okay.
No, we'll get closer to, the idea hopefully is that we have the sales tax code at the state level and then the cities, but see the difference is that so many cities have different definitions across the board, and so the whole point is to get the cities all on one page. If we can get the cities all on one page, then we can keep the two-tiered system. But that's going to be a long process to get the cities all on one page.
Let me ask you this. I believe there was a bill out there where they were trying to prevent cities from going to a third-party collection.
That's still there, and that comes up later.
Okay.
Yep. And then 1221 is urban revenue sharing. What that would have done is it would have frozen our urban revenue sharing at the 2009-2010 collection levels for 20 years, and they would have used the remainder, whatever on top of that, to pay for their leases to get their buildings back, or pay for the buildings to get it that they sold. That is also not moving. We've been successful in stopping that as well, but one thing I always say is nothing is completely gone until this legislature is out of session. And just because we've been successful in stopping this particular bill, they still don't have an answer to their budget problems, and they don't know how they're going to balance the budget. So urban revenue sharing continues to be an option. So we just have to stay vigilant in protecting it.
Romina,
Yes.
has the letter to the federal government about Medicaid been approved or not? I heard on the news today that they're still talking about it.
They are still talking about it. It turns out that we are obviously not one of the only states that's asking for a waiver. There are many states that are asking for a waiver so that we don't have to insure as many people as we currently do. And the Department of Health and Human Services at the federal level is handling each state differently, depending on what we have done already, what measures we have taken already, and what we haven't. In the letter that the governor received, there were suggestions on what measures should be taken in order to balance our budget in the healthcare arena. We've already done all of those, like cutting transplants, doing those things that have been so controversial. And so now the next step is we're just waiting for them to give us an absolute response as to whether we can cut those people, or there are some discussions right now about starting to charge co-pays, which before we were not allowed to charge co-pays for people that were on Medicaid. If they do start to charge a minimal fee, in the past that would have triggered a lawsuit from the federal government and we would have lost our federal funding. If we don't get a response back from the feds, we're going to have to go down that line anyway and trigger a lawsuit in order for them to respond to us, because they're just overwhelmed with the requests for waivers. So there are efforts by the legislature to just move forward and do what it is that we need to do in order to get that money back, or to get that money flowing. And then if we get sued, we'll just have to deal with that as it comes.
Thank you.
Sure. Just to go through a couple of other bills, there are so many bills that impact cities and towns that are out there right now. Most of them are being negotiated and worked out. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but if there's one that you're particularly interested in, just let me know and I'll be more than happy to update you or make sure that you're updated as it moves through the process. Our department directors have been working on specific bills depending on their areas. There's so many bills that impact police officers, fire safety, community development. I mean, it's all over the place. So I'm just going to give you a couple just to give you an idea. And like I said, if there's others that you want me to look into or you want feedback on, just let me know. Senate Bill 1165 and House Bill 2618 are companion bills, so they're the exact same bill in both houses, and this is the one that Vice Mayor Pizzillo was talking about third-party collectors. What this does is it prohibits cities from using third-party collectors to collect our sales taxes. This has been under attack for the past couple of years. We've been successful in stopping it. I don't think that's going to happen this year. This bill actually is the bill that catapulted the Model City Tax Code discussion to the top. So because of our defense of trying to keep the option to have third-party collectors, the business community, specifically the Arizona Tax Research Association, which is the watchdog for taxpayers in the business community, has said that this is the bill that has caused the discussion on Model City Tax Code. So our defense of this bill has gotten us in a little bit of hot water with the business community. So this is continuing to move. Chances are it will pass. So if we can only collect tax, we'll only be able to collect taxes for self-collecting or through DOR. Those are the only two options we'll have. There's only 3 or 4 cities right now that use an outside vendor. Those cities may get grandfathered in. They're looking at that to allow those cities, like the smaller ones. I think it's Cave Creek, little ones that use a third-party collector. Those are looking at getting grandfathered in, but then that will end that.
Will this eliminate another city from doing it for another city, or because that's a third party? Or
We're actually talking about that currently internally to see if there's an option for larger cities to take up that and then us contract with them through an IGA and provide them that service. That hasn't been something that we've brought to the business community yet because we don't even know if the larger cities have the capacity to do that. So we're having those discussions internally. If there is that ability and the larger cities feel like they can do that for us because they have a computer system set up, we will offer that as a negotiation to the business community in ATRA. But we just haven't gone that far yet.
The only reason I ask is as a former tax auditor, and the way we get ours collected through the state system, without that detail, I know there's a lot more efficient ways of doing it. So unfortunately, I don't believe we have the staff and all in place to do it ourselves off the ground, but there may be some options out there if they take away the third party. You know, some of the other larger cities may have that capability with some of their software. I don't know, but I mean, it's at some point, I really think the city is going to have to look at a more efficient way and get better information, because the state does not provide that kind of detail.
Right, and that's totally something that we talk about currently with the Arizona Tax Research Association. We've told them that the reason that this is needed is because DOR isn't as efficient as we'd like them to be. So either we staff up DOR and we do what it is that we need for cities, or the other option would be to go to another city. But we just haven't gotten that far yet. Okay, and the next bill is Senate Bill 1374 and House Bill 2153, which is my favorite bill of the year, is the fire sprinklers code. This thing will not go away. So they're companion bills. It started off with House Bill 2153. The minute that Representative Montenegro knew we were gaining some ground on stopping this bill, there was a companion bill introduced in the Senate to make it fast-tracked. And it has pretty much, it flew out of the House, and it's moving quickly through the Senate. What this pretty much does is it prohibits cities from mandating sprinklers in residential homes. So this is a property rights argument, personal responsibility. This is a $5,000 upgrade that people can't afford. You know, the home builders are really, tugging at this really hard, and they're doing a good job of it. There's still a lot of discussion on it. All boots are on ground on this, from the fire crews, fire marshals, to cities, to the actual sprinkler company has a pretty high-powered lobbyist down there working it. But, I mean, we're doing the best we can. This just seems like one of those things we're going to have to deal with.
If it passes, can I take it out of my house?
If you get a credit from your home builder, ask him that. Senate Bill 1286, Senate Bill 1160 is the municipal sales tax residential rental. This is a bill that has come up over and over in the past couple of years. What it says is that cities can no longer raise residential rental over the amount they currently have as of July 1st, 2011. So it's retroactive. Whatever our rate is set at 2011, January 1st, 2011. We cannot raise our residential rental unless we go to the vote of the people. It doesn't matter if your council, like ours, is able to do it by the vote of the council. This will mandate that you must go to the people in order to raise this particular tax. Again, this has a lot of support because not only is it being supported by the Republicans, it's also supported by the Democrats, because they're saying people are losing their homes, they're being forced to rent. If cities continue to raise the residential rental, it raises rents, and that's really a hardship on these poor people who have lost their homes. And so this is one that's also moving very quickly through the process. The only saving grace we would have on this one is if we continue to have discussions with the Arizona Tax Research Association on the Model City Tax Code. This causes a major discrepancy in the Model City Tax Code, and they don't like that. And so the hope is that we can use them to say, if we're going to continue negotiations on the Model City Tax Code, you can't allow these bills to move forward because they're just causing more discrepancies in something we're trying to fix. And so we're waiting to hear if they'll help us with that. But otherwise, if they don't step in, this will be something that passes.
You know, I find a lot of these discussions really interesting. I moved out here in '86 and was part of the Model City Tax Code when it was developed and adopted in '87, and they've been talking about this since '87. So, every year this kind of comes up, 20-plus years. They've been talking about combining in the Model City Tax Code and exemptions. I just kind of find it really all kind of interesting.
I'm so lucky that I get to be a part of it.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. So,
Senate Bill 1286 and Senate Bill 1598 are both bills that really are an overhaul of our permitting process and our permitting system. Senate Bill 1286, and I bundle them together because really we're negotiating on them together. Senate Bill 1286 pretty much puts a limit on how quickly we're supposed to have an answer on our permits. It's like 60 days. And Senate Bill 1598 is called the Regulator's Bill of Rights or something like that. So it's really just an overhaul of our permitting system. Those are both being negotiated. City of Phoenix has taken the lead on that, along with the League of Cities and Towns. Amendments are coming out every day. It's an open discussion, but something will pass. We just don't know at this point how strict it's going to be on our permitting processes and what items they are going to make us do in the future. So we're still working out those details. And I think that's enough damage for one night.
okay, questions? I just got just one real quick one. As these bills get closer to, passing, it'd be nice to start seeing some dollars associated with them, because I suspect as we move forward in the budget, we need to kind of know what kind of impact these things are going to have on us, so.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions? We ready? Meeting adjourned.